Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We are really thrilled and excited to have you join us for our Hire Like a Hero masterclass.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
As some people are still continuing to log in, we might use this time to cover a bit of the housekeeping before we really get started. Just so that everyone knows, we aim for this session to be around 40 minutes, plus question and answer time at the end. So we'll try to wrap this up in under 60 minutes. Also, the chat box is going to stay open for all of you to drop in any questions that you might have. So no need to wait until the end. Feel free to drop them in as you please. And as I mentioned, we've allocated some time at the end of the session to actually talk through some of the questions. We'll also have someone actually sitting behind the scenes answering some ones that come through as well. But yeah, I think we might now get started. So we'll start with some introductions. And yeah, I wanted to thank everyone again for joining our Hire Like a Hero masterclass on elevating your interview process for success. So my name is Jenny Williams. I'm one of the talent acquisition managers here at Employment Hero. My background over the last 9 years, I've had the pleasure of working in international recruitment, hiring for both global companies and some dynamic SaaS and tech startups. But I really found my home here at Employment Hero over the past 4 years. I've been extremely proud and grateful to be part of our exponential growth since I joined in 2020. And I'd now like to introduce Daniella, who's joining me today.
Hi, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here today with Jenny. So I'm Daniella Angel. Lovely to meet you all. I'm a talent acquisition partner here at Employment Hero for the last couple of years. And really, I've been leading the UK's hiring efforts during a super exciting period of growth for us. My background is that I have about a decade of experience and specialize in building talented go-to-market teams, specifically within tech and digital startups and scale-ups, covering everything from graduate level to senior exec hiring. And my real passion is around fostering diverse and inclusive workplaces.
Nice. Thanks, Daniella. So during our masterclass today, what you can expect to hear about is all the tools and techniques that you might need to master effective interviews. It's how to streamline your hiring processes and to ensure that you find the perfect fit for your team.
Yeah, and we're going to be guiding you through every step of that interview process, everything from preparation to post-interview follow-up, and demonstrate how tools, maybe like Employment Hero, could help you optimize and manage this process seamlessly. So look, whether you're a seasoned pro at hiring or you're brand new to it, we're here to provide you with valuable insights, hopefully, and lots of practical tips to elevate your hiring game.
Awesome. So I guess just to summarize the quick agenda for today, we'll start with understanding the importance of effective interviews and the cost of a bad hire. Then we're going to move into pre-interview preparation and creating a structured interview process. We'll also cover effective interview techniques, assessing skills and cultural fit, and how to leverage technology for the entire interview management. Finally, we'll use the time to discuss the post-interview process. And at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A to address any questions that you might have. So as mentioned, we've got the chat box open. Drop anything in that you are curious about. But I think it's time to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that we're going to kick off with is discussing how effective interviews can really impact your business.
Yeah, awesome. So we're going to be kicking off with how an effective interview process can positively impact your business success. So hiring the right talent is not just about filling roles, it's about strategically enhancing the capability of your entire organization so that you can achieve its goals more effectively and sustainably. Therefore, by hiring skilled talent to perform their roles effectively, this will boost productivity. Now, that results in increased efficiency and outputs and also produces higher quality of work. So, where this will have a positive impact is your company culture, whereby fostering an engaging work environment can lead to higher employee satisfaction, which translates to higher retention rates. So ultimately, a good hire drives business success by bringing in innovative ideas, driving high performance, and improving customer satisfaction.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, on the flip side, it's really important that we consider what the cost is if you make a bad hire or you make a mistake. There's a few things to consider here. So financially, number one, it's really expensive. If you are using an external recruitment source, recruitment costs could be mounting up, particularly if you need to replace a poor fit. Operationally, also, it's really disruptive. It will mean more time spent doing the same thing again, and detracting attention from other business growth needs, which potentially could decrease team morale and maybe also lower productivity. And additionally, a bad hire could, in worst case scenario, lead to high turnover or even damage your reputation and customer relationships, leading to lost revenue, which is definitely something we're keen to avoid.
Absolutely. And speaking of reputation, when interviewing, it's actually just really important to remember that you're representing your company and first impressions do count. So a structured interview process will reflect positively on the business's external brand. It's there to enhance candidate experience and the ability to attract top talent in what we're seeing today, a very competitive market. It will also help demonstrate the company's commitment to a fair and unbiased process, which then can positively influence the candidate's decision-making process if they were to accept your offer, if they're actually deciding between other offers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to summarize, investing time in a structured and well thought out interview process up front will ultimately save your business from costly consequences, and it will help you find the right person as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Yeah, perfect. Great summary. Thanks, Daniella. So now let's dive into our next topic, and that's going to be the pre-interview preparation. We're going to be providing you a guide on what steps are usually involved when preparing your interview process. So, kicking it off, the first step is to know what you're looking for in a candidate. This starts with defining the job requirements and also creating a detailed job description with specifications to clearly outline the skills, experience, attributes, which all make up the core competencies needed from the candidate in order for them to perform the role. So you want to hire people who are humble, hungry, smart, and have the skills and the experience to back it up. Now, defining those job requirements really sets the foundations for the right candidate and ensures that everyone involved in the hiring process is aligned on the position's deliverables. So if you're maybe not sure where to start on this step, there are plenty of online tools out there that can help you. It can simply be something like a Google search. You could look at similar job descriptions, and that can help you find some inspiration from some other organizations. There's also a multitude of AI tools out there at the moment, which everyone is leveraging, things like ChatGPT, or if you are using Employment Hero, we have actually built an AI job description generator in our ATS, and that can help you pad out some of the detail that you're looking for. or just at least give you a good template to start with. So I guess once you've written this all out, finalized it, it's now time to get the role advertised, which Danielle is going to take us through next.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So next up, you're going to want to think about, how do you post your job advert? Where are you going to find the candidates from? And so we need to start thinking about how we're going to build that all important pipeline and start attracting candidate applications. So to do this, your job ad will need to be posted across a number of different job boards and perhaps even your own website if you have access to that functionality to start driving some good engagement. The easiest and quickest way to streamline your process and post your role to multiple job boards simultaneously is to use an ATS, or an applicant tracking system, a bit like Employment Hero. This will be a great way to allow you to track and manage all of your applicants all in one place, super efficiently, will help you also comply with data protection regulations, and will also get all of those job posts out just at the click of one button, which is super, super kind of time efficient. However, if you're not using our platform, that's no problem. There are loads of different job boards which you can check out online just to get a feel for what works best for you, the type of role that you're advertising. Some job boards will specialize in various different industries. So do a bit of research and get a feel for what's right. Some even allow free listings, which is great if you can get hold of one of those. And if you are using the Employment Hero platform, make sure you're posting on the Swag job board. But ultimately, find a system that works for you and stick with it. It will really help.
Nice. Thanks, Daniella. So now we're going to encourage another step in the pre-interview preparation. And it's actually a critical part of the process, in our opinion, and that's to create what we call a scorecard. So a scorecard is a rating system, which is what the interviewers will use to score candidates on the set of criteria that's been outlined for the position. So each interviewer is going to rate both the technical and soft skills, and this is to ensure that there is a consistent and really objective evaluation process. Now, there are many, many different ways that you might set up a rating system, which we do highly encourage you to conduct some independent research on, so you find what's going to work best for you. But for some examples of different rating systems, this could include a simple thumbs up or thumbs down, or it could look something like a 1 to 5 rating scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And using a scorecard will ensure that you have a really structured, fair and unbiased way, most importantly, to assess your candidates. It's going to help making informed and accurate decisions by helping you compare those candidates really objectively and defining clear job requirements, leveraging tools like Employment Hero and using a structured scorecard will ultimately help attract the right talent for your business, as well as making the interview process run really smoothly and give you the most effective outcome. So it's a super fair way to run the process. We're actually going to take you through a bit of a scorecard example next. So here it is. This is an example of the kind of scorecard that you could perhaps use. This is actually a snapshot from the Employment Hero Applicant Tracking System, and it's what we use here to evaluate our candidates. So you'll see here there is a starred rating system from 1 to 5. So you could rate the candidate based on how you feel that they've performed in that particular area or category. There's also an area to write your feedback notes against each set of criteria. So you can write out a little bit more detail about how you felt that they performed there. And then ultimately, it'll give you the ability to compare candidate skills and determine, which candidate is going to be the best fit for your role. Like Jen said before, there are many different ways that you can structure a scorecard system. So it's a good idea to take some time to do some research, have a look around online, see what other businesses are doing, and just get a feel for what's out there to determine which is the best way for your business and your role. And look, if you aren't using an ATS, it's fine. There are other ways that you could structure it. You could even consider building just a straightforward spreadsheet with a similar theme.
Nice one. All right. We're going to now move on because I'm quite excited to talk about our next topic, and that's around creating a structured interview process and why that's really important. So in this topic, we're going to cover how to structure your interview process, and that's from initial screening all the way through to final interviews, as well as really looking at the specific topics and tasks that might be involved in each stage. We're also going to cover how you might approach writing up your interview questions, along with providing some examples. And look, we've got our top hero tip here, and that's defining a consistent interview process will really help you create a fair and unbiased process, which ultimately is going to lead to a more informed hiring decision and finding the best fit for your team.
Absolutely. So moving on to crafting out that initial screening stage, this is probably the first stage that you want to do within the hiring process, and it's really a screening call to quickly assess the candidate's fit for the role. It should generally be around 30 minutes, and the purpose is to cover off a few key themes. So, for example, you would probably want to go through the candidate's background, their interest in the role and their motivations to move, cover off some of their key skills, their availability, and their all-important salary expectations. So as an example, something that you might ask would be, can you walk me through your CV? Or tell me more about your career journey. What interests you in this position? What are your motivations to find a new role? This meeting will be a really good barometer check that the candidate is ticking the right boxes, and it should help you determine whether they're suitable to move to the next stage. And an important reminder coming up, actually. So look, interviews are not only an important tool for you to measure the suitability of the candidate, but also a great opportunity for the candidate to get really brought into your business and ascertain whether this is something that they want to do, whether it's a business that they want to work for, and whether it's the right opportunity for them. So I guess a really important tip is to make sure that you're setting aside time at the end at every interview stage so that the candidate can ask their questions. During this part of the session, you might get a better sense for their interest levels and their engagement levels based on the types of questions that they ask. But it's also a great opportunity for you to plug your brand, the purpose, the mission of your company, and let them know why they should join. And you might also want to use this time to be quite transparent about the possible challenges that lay ahead and the reasons that you're making the hire.
Fantastic. Well, if the candidate is successful in passing that first initial screening, we would then recommend a second interview, which is going to be a bit more structured around assessing skills. This might be a practical assessment depending on the nature of the role. So the purpose of including this type of interview is to really evaluate the candidate's hands-on and or technical skills, really. During this round of interviewing, it's a good idea to utilize a combination of behavioral and situational interview questions. We are going to cover some examples in the next topic, but you might also want to include adding in that practical assessment. Now, that could be done in so many different ways, but a few examples might be a live or mock scenario. It could be in the form of a presentation. It could be something like a take-home task or test, sorry. But the overall outcome that you're looking to get from the interview is to really help you measure the candidate's skills and competencies with more precision. And that's so that you can assess them by seeing an example of their work in action. This should really provide you with tangible answers, essentially, and outcomes, which will give you more confidence in your decision making. So as always, and at every interview stage, you should really leave enough time to answer and address any of the candidates' further interview questions as well. Now we're going to move to one of the last interview stages, and that would be to consider an interview focusing on the cultural ad. So this is where you will have the opportunity to really, I guess, better determine what the candidate can bring to enhance and enrich your existing culture, the team dynamic, but overall, work in the work environment. So you might be wondering what the difference is between a cultural ad and a cultural fit. So a culture fit often results in a team where everyone thinks and acts the same. It leads to a lack of diversity, which can limit creativity and innovation. So this is why it could be really important to consider hiring for cultural ad, which it focuses on seeking candidates who align with your core values of the business, but they also bring a unique perspective, experience, or skill set. So something you may look to measure during this interview are things like, what perspectives can this person add to the culture, rather than do they fit within the existing culture? So this shift in focus is a really great way to reduce unconscious bias. It's to create a dynamic and inclusive workplace, which will enrich your team and, offer fresh ideas and different perspectives.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cultural ad is super, super important, Jen. I couldn't agree more. Next up, you might be wondering, well, how do we decide who's on the hiring team, who's going to carry out each interview stage? So we're going to take you through deciding your hiring panel team members and who you should have at each stage. So look, as a guide for your initial screening, this is usually carried out by the hiring manager, but it could also be done by perhaps a recruiter, maybe internal recruiter or an external recruiter, or maybe even by a member of your HR team if you have one. Moving on to the skills and the practical assessment. Again, this is most likely to be done by the hiring manager. They are going to be the person that's best placed to assess the candidate's suitability for the role and measure their skill set in action. They'll probably be subject matter experts themselves, and so will know quite a lot about what they're looking for specifically. However, this stage could also be done with support from somebody else in the team, maybe someone else who is also a really strong subject matter expert, and they could potentially bring some other opinions into the hiring team, which is going to be really important. And then that final stage, cultural ad. This is most likely to be conducted by a panel. That's certainly what we would recommend anyway. Perhaps a panel with some more senior team members, maybe cross-functional team members, maybe someone from the HR team if you have one. And the reason it's better to have more people within that meeting is so that they can together give a really fair and unbiased viewpoint on the candidate, and to essentially measure that person based on a much broader set of opinions. That's going to be something that's really, really important to consider throughout.
Excellent. So next up, we're now going to be covering those all-important examples of behavioral, situational, and cultural questions, which we've briefly touched on. We're going to take a deeper dive into some of these interview techniques that ask open-ended questions. And it's where the candidates are asked to provide examples of their work or how they've handled various situations to give you further insights on how they might perform and can add value within your business. So you might be wondering, what do some of these questions look like?
Absolutely. So the first set of questions that we're going to cover is behavioral interview questions. Now, behavioral questions tend to focus on past experiences, and that's going to help predict the candidate's future behavior within your business. So these are most helpful when you're looking to assess a candidate's skills, competencies, and how they've handled similar situations in the past. So to dive into some examples, if you were looking to perhaps measure time management, pace of work, you might want to ask something like, describe a time where you had to meet a tight deadline. How did you prioritize tasks and ensure timely delivery? Or if you're looking to measure ownership and adaptability, you might ask something like, can you share an example of when you had to adapt to a significant change in your work environment or project? How did you handle it? And finally, if you wanted to look at how they might overcome challenges or dig into their leadership skills in a bit more detail, you might ask something like, tell me about a successful project you led. What challenges did you face and how did you overcome them? So these are all quite good ways to find out a bit more about their behaviors and get a sense that they're going to be a great fit for what you need within this role.
Excellent. So now what we're going to take a look at is the situational type questions. And this is going to assess how candidates may act in hypothetical scenarios. We find this actually particularly helpful for more junior candidates who perhaps wouldn't have yet gained certain types of experience. So this will actually determine or help determine how they can perform in these certain situations. So look, let's run through some of the examples here that we've got on the screen. The first one is maybe you're looking to find out how they work under pressure and when things unexpectedly change. So example question, imagine you're working on a tight deadline and a team member suddenly falls ill. How would you handle this situation? The second example is maybe you'd like to measure how they handle a tricky piece of feedback or maybe manage a tough situation regarding a project or a client. So an example here, you received negative feedback from a client about a project you're leading. How would you handle this feedback and ensure the project success? And the last example we've got here is you might want to measure crisis management, adaptability, or something like agility. The example here we've got is you're in charge of organising an event and the venue unexpectedly cancels at the last minute. How would you handle this crisis? So as you can see, all of the examples are really soliciting the how. This can help you measure how they might handle the tough situation and what they might do.
Yeah, brilliant. And finally, we're going to move on to those all-important cultural ad interview questions. So some of the themes that you could cover during this section are, firstly, asking about their experiences with past company cultures to understand their values and preferences. A question here could be, how would you describe the company culture at your last job? Were you comfortable working in that environment? Why or why not? Next up, you could use questions to perhaps get insights into their personality, but of course, being really careful not to delve into their private life here. An example of this could be, what has been the most valuable feedback you have ever received, and what did you learn from it? And we could also look at presenting hypothetical situations to perhaps gauge their creativity and maybe even their alignment with your company values. An example here could be, tell me about a time where you used a creative solution to solve a problem, and what might you do differently if it happened again? So a really good guideline, I guess, to follow here is to ensure your questions are really open-ended but focused. Really avoid personal questions. We don't want to do that. And balance out the questions across all of your interviews between cultural add and your behavioral and situational, your qualificational questions. And that's going to give you a really good mix of answers when you're interviewing candidates.
Yeah, perfect. And actually following on from some of your points there, Daniela, we thought it actually would be quite important to summarize some of the all-important do's and don'ts when interviewing. So some of the do's that we recommend: please research your candidate. Make sure you've blocked sufficient time off before that interview to read through their CV, perhaps their cover letter. You might want to look at their LinkedIn profile, or make sure you know a bit about them before you start. A great way to do that is actually perhaps make some notes about some of the interest areas that you've discovered about that candidate. It will really show a better engagement. And do remember, when you're, conducting the interview, it's really important to set an agenda at the start, because candidates are going to be a little bit nervous. They're going to be thinking, what are we going to be discussing today? So if you go into that interview really confident, set that agenda, really lay down the expectations. It's also important to give them a rough estimate of time and what you'll be discussing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the flip side, there's the don'ts, the things that you perhaps should be trying to avoid. So number one on that list is to not be late. Please ensure that you're on time for the interview. You have a really finite amount of time with that candidate, and it's super important to not only, set a good example of how you work within your business, but also to be really respectful of that candidate's time. They're giving up time from their day to meet with you and hopefully be a great addition to your business. The other thing to avoid is simple yes or no questions. Keep your questions really open-ended to give the candidate space to tell you their story. Like I mentioned previously, we want to be avoiding those personal questions. It's not an appropriate setting during an interview, and it could introduce some bias. And then finally, just around kind of prevention of personal bias. So ensuring that you're really neutral. You're there really to measure the candidate objectively based on their skills and their experience, and not your personal opinions. And that's where that scorecard comes into play again, just to make sure that you're being really, really fair and keeping it super objective. So next, we're going to move on to assessing skills and culture fit. So the big question is, what should we be listening out for in our candidate answers? I'm sure you've all been wondering that as we've been going through all of these questions, but what's the right answer? And how do we confidently assess that whilst we're in the interview process, and make sure that the candidate's going to be the right hire for the business? So there are a few things that we can be looking out for, as well as some red flags to avoid, and we're going to cover that next.
Well, we better, jump in and hear about what is worth listening out for in the candidate's answers. And one thing that is used really well is the STAR method. So for those who may not be familiar with the STAR method, this focuses on situation, understanding the challenge that the employee faced, and understanding the wider context. Task, obtain the details of the task, project, initiative that they worked on. action, listening out to their approach to the situation or task. What action did they take? What was their involvement? What was their ownership? And lastly, result. How did their actions impact the outcome of the situation or task? So this is a really great way to assess a candidate's problem solving, ownership, and communication skills. Good candidates often use the STAR method to articulate themselves when they're breaking down their examples and explaining it in their answers. So not only do you want to hear about the positive outcomes, also potentially negative experiences and how they were really able to overturn them and get things to come around.
Yeah, that's super important and a really great method to measure people. And then next up, we're going to share a little bit more around what to look out for. What might your considerations be? How to identify red flags. So conventional red flags are certain traits or behaviors which indicate that the candidate is not going to be a good fit for your role. During the interview process, it's important to keep watch out for these indicators. Be aware that they might be subtle, especially given the candidates are likely to be a bit nervous before and during the interview. But there are a few telltale signs that usually go above that kind of standard interview jitters that you can keep watch for. First up is a lack of examples or experiences or detail. So candidates that are not able to provide examples from their past, understandably may be nervous, but it could also indicate a little bit of dishonesty, perhaps. So look, the best thing to do here is give them time to think and process. Let them, or maybe you could rephrase your question to help solicit a little bit more detail. But if after all that, they still can't give you some substance and some detail, that could be a bit of a watch out. Next up is listening out for consistent negativity. We want people who are super positive and upbeat. So look, speaking negatively about previous colleagues, companies, managers, clients, etc., could be a little bit of a signal for a lack of ownership, perhaps, or accountability. Whilst honesty is important, consistently blaming others without acknowledging maybe your own personal learning within that situation or your personal growth could just be a little bit concerning. So ensure that you're looking out for the positivity and trying to avoid that negativity piece. And finally, coming back to that accountability piece again, there's the lack of accountability or self-awareness. So look, none of us are the finished product. Everyone has areas to improve, areas for growth. And it's really important that we can recognize that in ourselves. So if a candidate really struggles to perhaps admit past mistakes or their role in team failures, maybe where they could improve their learnings and where they have areas for growth, even when you've given them the time and the space to reflect on that and think about what those things could be, it could be an indicator of a bit of a lack of self-awareness and accountability. So you might want to just be wary of that one in case it's another little red flag. Overall, the key theme here is that we want to be setting the candidate up for success. Let's give them lots of fair opportunities to share the relevant information and answers with you, whilst, of course, measuring their softer skills, like how they communicate, to ensure that they're going to be someone that's going to bring the right attitude and energy for the role that you're hiring for. And if you still don't get those answers, then you could be looking at a few considerations there that might make you less eager to hire that person. So moving on now to leveraging the all-important technology for interview management. It's something that we're very passionate about at Employment Hero. And I guess something that's good to note is a bit of a pro tip here. 86% of recruiting professionals say that an applicant tracking system, or an ATS, has helped them hire better and faster. And I can definitely attest to that. I'm sure Jenny can too.
1000%. We are now going to take a little bit of a dive into how an applicant tracking system can help you streamline your hiring process and really remove the manual administrative tasks that really take up your valuable time when you're hiring. Utilizing technology will help you be more organized and manage your candidate experience really, really well. So first up, we're going to look at scheduling and coordination. So generally speaking, an applicant tracking system or any type of recruiting platform are really great ways for you to become a scheduling wizard. It can help you speed up the process and automate time-consuming tasks like managing calendar availability, scheduling interview invitations, setting reminders as well. And that's to really ensure that you're following a smooth and efficient process. When it comes to candidate tracking, an ATS allows you to easily track and manage candidates through the different stages of the interview process. So think of it like a project management tool. You can see at each stage where the candidate is, from initial applications right through to final decision, and the last stage, all in the one place. And then finally, with the centralized feedback collection. So this is probably, really importantly, a space to securely collect and store all of the interview feedback. You can collate that with the hiring team on the platform. This is obviously all the scorecards or notes that have been made about the candidate throughout the interview process. And this is where it's really easily accessible and organized. So this will help you come to simpler processes around making really informed decisions on who you're going to hire.
Absolutely. And so we are nearing the end. And so what we're going to do now is dive into some post-interview tips. This is a crucial stage within the process to kind of ensure that you're transitioning smoothly from your candidate evaluation stage all the way through to making your final hiring decision. And in this next section, we're going to cover how to effectively collate interview feedback, conduct a debrief with your hiring panel, manage the offer process, including how to close out the loop with any unsuccessful candidates and ensure that you're maintaining a really positive candidate experience throughout for all the people that have entered your process.
Nice. All right, well, let's start with collating interview feedback. So after all the interviews have taken place, gathering feedback from all the interviewers is really essential. This is where the interview scorecards that we've been discussing really come into play, including reviewing interviewer notes to ensure that you've got a really, really comprehensive view of the candidate's performance throughout the interview process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to need to, of course, have a bit of a debrief and decision-making session with the hiring panel. So pull them all together, hold that session, and that's going to help really with the final decision, as well as discussing all the candidates that you've met. So during this session, best thing to do is compare and contrast all the feedback, highlight the strengths, talk through the considerations and some of those red flags. And ultimately, you want to come to a consensus and reach a decision on the best fit for the role.
Absolutely. And then we finally get to The fun part, the exciting part, and that's making the offer to your chosen candidate. So ensuring that when you do extend that job offer, you're doing it in a timely manner, doing it really promptly. When you're making that offer, it's really providing that candidate with all of the details of the role, the employment conditions, confirming salary and benefits, to hopefully win that acceptance. Equal to that, of course, is closing the loop with your unsuccessful candidates. So for those that are not selected, it's really important to provide applicants with objective, respectful, and timely feedback. Recommend doing that over the phone where it's possible. That will just maintain a really positive candidate experience, add that personal touch, and it also keeps the door open for candidates that you might want to consider for future opportunities. It's also really important when protecting your company brand and reputation as well.
It is. We've got a top hero tip there as well, which is act fast. If candidates don't hear back within 1 to 2 weeks, they lose interest and move on. Don't delay, communicate and decide quickly, which is pretty much what Jen just said, but it's all about being really swift, and ensuring that you're moving as fast as possible.
That's it.
So that brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you so much for tuning in, for listening to our tips and our advice. We so hope that you have found it valuable, that hopefully you've taken away a few insights and a few learnings, and that you're going to put them into practice within your own business. Since we've been online, we have received a few questions from some of you. So we would love to address a couple of those now, if we've got a bit of time. So I'll dive in. I'll ask the first question here, and Jen, perhaps you could take the floor answering it. So first question I can see here is, how do you handle discrepancies between interviewers' feedback, and how do you resolve differing opinions on a candidate?
Really, really great question. Obviously, super relevant to what we've been discussing today. So I guess I'll draw upon some of the topics that we have covered. I guess when you want to ensure that everyone's voice is heard, Daniella just spoke about the importance of maybe a debrief session. So that might be inviting all of the interviewers that have been part of your interview process to collectively discuss the candidate feedback. Because look, you might have some fence sitters, you might have some people with some strong opinions for and against. So really just kind of bringing everyone together to have that conversation. Look, it might change people's minds, it might cement people in more of their decision making, but I think that that's a really collaborative way to really talk through any discrepancies that may be faced when you're in that final decision making process. Or whether it's final or not, it might be in the interview process, whether to proceed them or not. So that would probably be our main tip there. But also utilization of those scorecards. You know, if you're really setting those foundations early and upfront in the interview process, particularly if you are the hiring manager and you've really laid out those kind of core competencies that you want assessed, you know, it might just really help all of the other interviewers that are part of that process to really get everyone aligned and on the same page to understand, you know, what are the priorities, what are the must-have and requirements from this candidate. And that way it's really keeping it objective, it's keeping it focused, and really being able to ensure that, yeah, everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely, yeah. You want to take the question, Jen?
I was going to say, yeah, I might take on the next question and ask this one of you. So we've had a question come in that says, what are some best practices for avoiding unconscious bias in interviews? How can we ensure our hiring process is fair and inclusive?
Yeah, this is a great question and something that I'm actually really passionate about. I think there are many different parts of the process where you need to be considering fairness, eliminating unconscious bias. You know, when it comes to the beginning part of the process, which is reviewing applications, there are lots of different tips that we can give you on that. And I think there might be some external resources available or other webinars where we've perhaps talked through that stage in particular in a little bit more detail, which we can follow up with. However, specifically within the interview process itself, ensuring that we're, I guess, eliminating unconscious bias, being really fair, comes down to linking it back to those really fair and structured interview processes. So we want to make sure that you're not changing up the interview process per candidate or halfway through the hiring process. Ensure that that hiring panel remains consistent throughout and at the same stages that they've always operated. Use a really diverse interview panel if you can. Find people within the business that have varying backgrounds, varying skill sets, varying experience levels. And that's going to give you a real good amount of diversity of thought within the hiring panel, which will come with a multitude of different opinions and hopefully help to create a really fair and objective way to measure those candidates coming through. And then final point really is just around standardizing and utilizing your scorecards. As Jen just mentioned before, those scorecards are absolutely invaluable. They're such an important way to measure candidates against each other fairly and objectively based on their skill set and the value that they can bring to your company based on their experience. So those would be some of the key things that I would highlight. We could definitely do a whole other session in itself, I think, just on this.
Couldn't we?
But sadly, we don't have time for that today, so we'll move on to the next question, which I think I've got here in front of me. So the next question is, how do you keep candidates engaged if the hiring process takes longer than expected? And what are some of the communication strategies that we can use to keep them engaged?
Yeah, really, really great question. Gosh, audience, great questions today. Gosh, wouldn't it be great if everything we just delivered to you today just went without a hitch? You know, everything was a breeze and everyone did what they were supposed to and everything ran on time. Well, we'd be living in a dream world. So it's common. It's very, very common for hiring processes to sometimes take longer than expected. You know, sickness, holiday leave, all these different things kind of factor in. But I think the thing that can be the most, important part is your communication and the cadence that you keep with your candidates, particularly for the ones that you are having to maybe keep warm, if there's delays in decision making, if you're obviously trying to catch candidates up in the process that may have entered it at a later stage. I think, honesty and transparency is probably where you're going to really win a lot of points with your candidates to actually keep them warm in the process. I can understand you probably maybe can't be honest and transparent about every single thing that's happening in the background, but giving the candidate some kind of clear picture about maybe why there's been a delay in the business or, for whatever reason that is. Also understand that your time is precious and you can't be calling, every single candidate every single day with an update, not certainly asking for that kind of regular cadence. It might be that you draft a template in your applicant tracking system and schedule some emails to go out by the end of the day or before the weekend if you still haven't got an answer or a definitive update to share with them. So that could save you a lot of time as well. So really utilizing, again, the tools and technology to automate some of those manual or admin tasks, but really using it in important ways like keeping your candidates updated.
Yeah, really, really important. Good tips there, Jen. Love that.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think we've got time for one more. We'll quickly do this one with you, Daniela, because I think it's actually a really valuable question. I think a lot of our audience might be interested to hear. And that is, what are some tips for negotiating job offers? How can we handle salary negotiations effectively?
Yeah. Really great question. There are so many things that we could say here, and I'm conscious of our time, so I'll try and condense them as much as possible. First thing is around transparency from the very beginning of the process. So as soon as you're jumping on that initial screen, you want to start having salary conversations with them then. Find out what their salary expectations are, make sure that you're aligned in terms of what your budget is as a business and what their expectations are. If it feels like they're slightly over budget, ascertain whether you have wriggle room. If you don't have wriggle room, then maybe this is the time to say goodbye to that candidate, because you're probably not going to get there a little bit later on. So I would say do that. I would say we talk about ABC, always be closing. So something that you can do throughout the interview process, perhaps after every interview stage, is have a conversation with the candidate, find out how they got on, where's their head at, did they enjoy the interview? If they were offered the role, what might they be looking to accept? Can I confirm that your salary expectations are still X, Y, or Z? So constantly be thinking about what that is and be having that conversation with the candidate. The other thing to do, I guess, is just be really reticent of market rates. You know, look at the data that comes through with all the applications that you get, or if you're doing a bit of headhunting, what are those candidates' salary expectations, just to ensure that your company budget is aligned with what should be paid for that particular role. And generally just kind of think about how you can balance out your budget with your candidates' expectations, their experience, their level of capability, and ensure that it's really, really fair. Transparency is the big one here. That's the key. Let people know from the very beginning what you're paying. Try not to be wishy-washy about it. I know sometimes some smaller companies need to be, because they want to get a feel for market first, but know definitively what you want to pay this person, and let them know from the outset, to avoid any miscommunication towards the end of the process.
Fantastic tips. Wow. Thank you, Daniela. And thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. We hope you have had a few takeaway or light bulb moments, hopefully lots of learnings as well. Would really appreciate your feedback. Just so you know that the webinar has been recorded today. We'll send out the details after today's session. And yeah, feel free to send us through any feedback.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn as well. Our LinkedIn profiles are there on the screen. We would love to connect with you. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, as Jen said. And we really hope you found this valuable today. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. And we will see you again very soon.